Hey guys, what up? Tony here. My heart, my vision, and my passion is to take God's message of purity to the world. The Power of Purity is a 501c3 nonprofit, and like any other ministry, the reach and impact of what we're able to accomplish through the power of purity is predicated upon the finances that we have available. In view of this, we need help. And it's only because of faithful ministry partners like you that the Power of Purity is touching lives literally all around the world. Would you consider making a donation or becoming a monthly partner with this ministry so we can continue to unleash massive amounts of destruction upon the kingdom of darkness? Every dollar you give is tax deductible, and every dollar will be used to advance the healing message of purity to a world that desperately needs it. If you've been touched and encouraged by the Power of Purity, and if you believe in the message of this ministry, would you prayerfully consider becoming a monthly partner? If so, you can visit the Power of Purity website at www.powerofpurity.org, and at the top of the page is a donations link where you can become a vital part of this ministry's impact. Thank you so much for your love, your prayer, and your partnership. God bless you.
The Power of Purity Podcast. Real talk for real men who struggle with real temptation in the real world, who are ready for real answers and real success. The Power of Purity Podcast.
Welcome to the Power of Purity Podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity Podcast. I'm really glad you could be with me today. And if you've been with me over the past several episodes, you know that I've been in the middle of a series of episodes that I'm calling the Sexual Alliance. And the thesis is this: it's God's will, plan, and design that a married couple has a sexual alliance, which means they limit any and all expressions of their corresponding sexualities exclusively to one another. And the definition of the sexual alliance is this: the sexual alliance is a covenant between a husband and a wife where they both recognize and embrace God's design for human sexuality, which means their mutual sexual gifts belong exclusively to one another, that they express their sexual gifts exclusively with one another, and that they will be sexually available to one another on a frequent and recurring basis. And I've got a total of 19 principles of the sexual alliance, and we've covered 16 of them so far. So today we continue with principle number 17 of the sexual alliance, which is this: the sexual alliance will require you to walk in the light with each other. And what I mean by this is that the sexual alliance will require you not just to come into the light with each other, but to also walk in the light with each other. Essentially, the alliance will require you to confess to each other if you mess up or violate the alliance in any way once you've established the alliance. Or said another way, if you violate the alliance, you have to disclose the truth to one another. So I have a little example here that I wrote out, and let's just say that I have a sexual alliance with my wife, and weeks or months into it, I mess up, something goes wrong, I slip up, maybe I indulge my flesh and I look at pornography one night. So I'm going to have to confess that to my wife, because a principle of the sexual alliance is that I'm going to walk in the light with my spouse. And the alliance teaches me that my sexual gift belongs exclusively to my wife. I can only express my sexual gift with my wife only. But I messed up. I looked at porn last night. I indulged my sexual self apart from my wife, so I'm going to have to confess that to her and bring that into the light with her. So I might say something like this: "Honey, I'm very sorry, but I need to talk to you and I need to confess something to you. I really messed up last night. I saw something on the internet that I should not have seen, and instead of resisting it, I indulged in it. And before I knew it, I ended up looking at porn, I think for about an hour, and then I ended up masturbating. I don't know why I did it. I feel terrible about it. I feel very ashamed. I know that I should have never done it, and I know that what I did was a violation of our marriage, and it was a violation of our sexual alliance, and I'm sorry. This isn't the man that I want to be, and I'm really going to try harder to never let this happen again, and I'm willing to talk about it as much as you feel that we need to talk about it, but I'm asking for your forgiveness, and I knew that I had to disclose this to you because I'm committed to walking in the light with you in every way in view of our sexual alliance." Now, telling on yourself like this is going to be a hard thing to do, and it may be very hurtful to the person that's violated in the situation, but it will prove to them that they can trust you because you're no longer hiding the truth from them, you're no longer keeping secrets, and you're willing to tell on yourself even when you mess up. You see, there's this concept that I think maybe I've touched on before in earlier episodes of the podcast, but I call it the two offenses. When a man sins sexually in the context of his marriage, there's normally two separate offenses that he's guilty of. The first offense is the sexual offense itself that he's guilty of. Maybe he looked at porn, or he masturbated apart from his wife, or maybe he had a sexualized experience on the internet, or maybe he went to a strip club, or whatever it is that he did to act out sexually. But the second offense is that he almost invariably lies about what he did, in the sense that he covers it up. He does not admit it to his wife. These things remain hidden and in the dark, so he's hiding the truth and he does not disclose to his wife what he's done. Then typically a long period of time passes during which the man continues to act out, and therefore there's an ongoing accumulation of these offenses. And then when and if the wife finally discovers what he's really been doing, you see, she catches him. She realizes that he's been living a lie with her, representing himself to be one man when in reality he has all these secrets and really is a completely different man than the man that she thinks that she's married to. So now we have two different offenses on the landscape of this situation. We have the sexual offense itself, but then we have the lie and the cover-up. And by the way, which one of these two offenses do you think almost invariably is the greater offense and the greatest hurt to the wife? And I would advocate virtually invariably that the lie itself is more offensive to women than the actual sexual offense and the sexual acting out itself. And although the sexual offense is bad enough and hurtful enough, I've found that it's almost easier for women to forgive the actual offense itself than it is to forgive the lie that's typically attached to the offense. Almost as if a woman could almost give her husband the benefit of the doubt. Well, I don't like that you did this and it really hurts me, but I at least understand that you're a man and you could be tempted, so you looked at porn or you did this or that, and that's very hurtful, and it's a violation of our commitment to one another, but I understand how you were tempted and you messed up, so I'm willing to forgive you. But what's harder to forgive is the lie that's often attached with the sexual offense. So you see, it's incredibly important for a couple from this point forward, once they've entered into a true sexual alliance, to never ever keep secrets from each other again, and to immediately disclose to one another when and if they mess up and violate the alliance. And making such a confession to your spouse might be hard and it might be hurtful, but it will be nowhere near as hurtful if you continue to hide the violation and lie about it, and then your spouse finds out later that this happened, but you did not disclose it, and you've been hiding it ever since then. And in that case, your spouse will feel like, I can't trust you because you've been living a lie to me again. So you see, if you mess up and you at least go to them and confess what you did and bring it into the light, it might still be hurtful, but trust might not be as broken because at least they'll know you were willing to tell me about it, to not hide it, so at least you're walking in the light, and that creates a kind of security in my heart because I know you're living honestly with me, and even if you mess up, you're going to share it with me. So a true sexual alliance will require you to walk in the light with your spouse and to seek to never to lie to each other again. And in view of this, you guys, just coincidentally, the day that I'm recording this particular podcast, coincidentally, I was on the internet last night, and I happened to see some things that were very marginal, and my conscience was kind of convicted about it, and I don't want there to be a single thing between my wife and I. I don't want there to be a single secret or anything lurking in the darkness that's suggestive or any way that I'm violating my alliance with my wife. So this morning, after we woke up, I went ahead and I talked with her, and I disclosed to her exactly what happened, and it really wasn't all that big of a deal compared to the things that are on the internet, but it was a kind of violation to my own conscience, and I just felt like I don't even want there to be one single little seed of a secret, something that happened that I'm kind of hiding from my wife. So I brought it into the light. I told her what happened, and it really was not that big a deal. And of course, she was very willing to forgive me, and it just keeps a clean slate between me and my wife, and it affirms to her that she can trust me because I've done this many, many times. Anytime something happens to me that's marginal in any way, I disclose it to my wife. In fact, there's this particular dynamic that I call getting slimed, and every once in a while, I feel my soul just get slimed. And what this is when I'm out and about in the public, I could be at Walmart, I could be at the bank, I could be at the park, whatever it is, and I have an encounter with a particular woman, and for whatever reason, I just have a sense of a very heavy sexual vibe around this woman. She's very seductive. Maybe our eyes happen to meet one another, and I can just tell she's the kind of woman that would have been very, very dangerous to the old Tony. And there's this kind of slight invitation or vibe or sexualized vibration that happens. And I don't know if you guys can relate to what I'm saying or not, but I'm telling you, I think it's a spiritual reality. And I feel myself get slimed. So what I do is I immediately disclose to my wife. I'll often immediately call her and tell her, babe, something just happened. And I saw this woman, and I felt this thing, and I felt myself get slimed, and I felt like this shimmering sense of temptation or allurement around me or something. And I could feel myself beginning to be tempted, and I just want to disclose to you what happened. And my wife is familiar with this language, and she understands what it means. And I think she really appreciates the reality and the fact that I'm willing to tell her these things because it creates this security in her that I'm not hiding anything from her. In fact, let me go ahead and just share one other story with you guys. And I don't know that I've ever shared this story in the context of the podcast, but over the years, through our situation, my wife and I have had some rental properties. And this one time we had this house for rent, and this guy was renting the house, and he was kind of a biker kind of a guy. And unfortunately, he was kind of slow on paying the rent, so whenever he had some money, I was interested in getting while the getting was good. So this one particular day, he called me, and he said that he had rent money for me, and I was going to be over that way. So I said, well, I'll stop by this evening, and I appreciate it. So I went by to get the rent, and I walked up to the house. I knocked on the door, and instead of the guy that I was renting the house to, instead of him answering the door, a young lady answered the door. And she was a very attractive blonde woman, long blonde hair, and I could immediately see that she had this, like, I don't know if it was a halter top kind of blouse thing on, and she very obviously had no bra. It was very, very low cut. It was very revealing, and in my estimation, just pretty inappropriate. So, of course, I tried to basically ignore what I was seeing, and I'm looking her in the eyes, and I said, is he here? I'm the landlord. He told me to come by to get the rent. And she says, well, he's not here right now, and I don't know anything about this, and he didn't leave me any money to give you, so I'm sorry, I don't know what the deal is. So I'm standing there for a moment talking to her. Well, do you know what time he's going to be back? And as I'm chatting with her for a moment, she suddenly does the most unexpected thing. I'm telling you guys, she leans over, she leans her shoulders toward me, and she bends at the waist and puts her hands on her knees. So she's kind of bending toward me. And as she does this, I'm telling you, her breasts literally fall out of this blouse top that she has on. And I'm standing there and I literally can just see her breast right in front of me. And this is apparently a not so subtle kind of invitation. I think without a doubt, she with deliberate intention was showing herself to me. And I look down and I see her breasts. I couldn't help it. And I look back up at her eyes and I just kind of must have been kind of childlike because I kind of stuttered and stammered. I don't even remember what I said. And I kind of backpedaled and stumbled away from the door. And I quickly ran and literally got in my car and fled the scene to escape. And to this day, I really don't know exactly what was going on there. I don't know if she was a prostitute. I don't know if this was a setup. I don't know if it was a kind of invitation. His intention was he didn't have the money to pay me rent. So he was thinking, come over and maybe you can get some sex from this girl instead of money. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know what the situation was. All I know is what happened right in front of me, and all I knew is what I saw, and I didn't even try to see it. This event just unfolds right in front of me. So as I'm pulling out of the driveway, I pick up my cell phone, and I called my wife immediately, and I was so upset and shaken by this, I literally was crying. I was crying, and I said, babe, I have to talk to you. I have to tell you something. I can't believe what just happened. I saw this woman's boobs, and I wasn't even trying to see it. I went to get the rent. I knocked on the door. This lady came to the door. I don't even know who she was. I've never seen her. And I'm talking to her. She has this blouse, and she bent over, and her boobs came out, and I could see. And I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it was an invitation. I don't know if she was inviting me in, but I have to tell you what happened. And I'm crying, and my wife is so awesome and so beautiful and so sweet. She immediately said, I'm going to pray over you. And she just immediately began to pray over me. Dear God, protect my husband. I stand with my husband. We rebuke this temptation in Jesus' name. And I don't even remember what all Sherry prayed, but she prayed this beautiful prayer. And this was an opportunity and an expression of the sexual alliance that we have with one another. And I think it was an expression of the 17th principle of the sexual alliance. The sexual alliance will require you to walk in the light with each other. Anytime anything happens, you need to confess to each other. You need to have this alliance where you're disclosing everything and anything to one another, and it's going to strengthen your alliance. And that brings us to principle 18, which is this. The sexual alliance will make sexual integrity possible in a couple's life. I'd advocate that it's going to be virtually impossible for a married couple to be people of sexual integrity and sexual purity without the help of one another. The way God set this thing up is that one man and one woman would have each other, and they'd have regular access to one another sexually within the context of their marriage. And through this alliance and their commitment to one another, they'd be able to manage their sexual selves in an appropriate and a healthy way. And I'll offer 3 proof texts to support my premise here. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." You see, in the beginning, God made Eve to be a helpmate for Adam. And the word helpmate, by the way, is defined as one who helps or one who provides relief and provides aid. In other words, God knew that Adam would probably have a very difficult time if he tried to do life alone. So God gives Adam this helper. So just think about it, guys. If the very definition of sexual integrity implies that a couple can only express their sexual selves within the context of their marriage relationship with one another, then that couple will inevitably be in serious trouble if they're not able to connect with each other sexually on a frequent and recurring basis. Or said another way, a man needs his wife sexually, and a woman needs her husband sexually, and if they're going to be people of sexual integrity that are honoring God with the expression of their sexual selves, they need to have this alliance and this commitment to one another. And for this reason, the sexual alliance makes sexual integrity possible for a man and a woman because it puts them within each other's reach sexually, and it closes every other possible sexual expression to them, so purity becomes possible. It becomes achievable. My second proof text is 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5, which we alluded to much earlier in the beginning episodes of the sexual alliance. Verse 5, "Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so you may commit yourselves to prayer, then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." This scripture is really awesome, you guys, and it essentially teaches that regular sexual access between a husband and wife will empower them in at least 3 very important ways. Number 1, it will empower them to resist Satan. Number 2, it will empower them to resist temptation. And number 3, it will help them and empower them to maintain self-control. And by the way, I might suggest that this principle presumably has 2 sides, like a coin has 2 sides, a heads and a tails. So in other words, if sexual access to your spouse empowers a couple to resist Satan and to resist temptation and to maintain self-control, then I think maybe we can assume the opposite, which is that if a couple does not have sexual access to one another on a regular basis, then they will likely have problems resisting Satan, resisting temptation, and maintaining self-control. And my third proof text is Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. "One standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. But 3 is even better, for a triple-braided cord is not easily broken." Notice that 1 person by themselves can be defeated, but 2 people standing together, it says, can conquer. Then notice that by adding a 3rd person, it brings even more strength to the equation. And I believe this verse is a reflection of God's design and intention for marriage from the very beginning of time, that God always intended marriage to be a 3-way relationship between a man and a woman and God Himself. And when a man and a woman are willing to stand in alliance and commitment with one another, It brings an unbelievable strength to their marriage. And then when you add God to the equation, it says a triple braided cord is not easily broken. You see, sexual purity becomes possible because we're now doing marriage and we're doing sex in accordance to God's will and design and purpose. So we see that the sexual alliance will make sexual integrity possible in a couple's life. And that brings me to our 19th and our final principle concerning the sexual alliance, which I'm calling a word of encouragement. And I'd like to close this session with a special encouragement to couples. And I'd like to acknowledge that I understand that the content of this session and its implications might seem overwhelming to some people, especially this concept of the possibility of disclosing the truth to one another as we seek to establish or reestablish the sexual alliance in the context of our marriage. And it might especially be overwhelming if you're the person referenced in this session whose spouse comes to you and confesses to you that you have not been the sole object of their sexual gift and that they have, in fact, been stealing orgasms from you. I understand that if your spouse comes to you to disclose this information to you, that it could be very surprising and alarming or upsetting and confusing and overwhelming to you. And I would say rightfully so. And I also understand that you'll probably need a considerable amount of time as you seek to process what your spouse has disclosed to you and as you seek to heal from the significant hurt that all of this might cause you, and as you seek to reestablish trust with your spouse if such trust has been broken. But with all that being said, I do want to offer you this one final word of encouragement and exhortation. And I know you might not see this situation at this moment as a blessing, but I do believe that you might look back one day and see what your spouse is attempting to do through all of this as a great blessing indeed. Because you see, there's something that I know and something I believe very strongly in my heart, and that is that unfortunately, a true sexual alliance does not exist in many marriages, if not most marriages. And therefore, my primary point is this. If your spouse is coming to the place in their heart and life through the mercy and the work and the power of God in them, where they're ready to commit their sexual gift exclusively to you as their spouse, and they're willing to confess their past sins and their past weaknesses and struggles to you, and they're inviting you into a sexual alliance with them, and they're interested in recommitting themselves and reestablishing a true sexual alliance with you in the context of your marriage, then I believe there's reason to give great glory and honor and praise to God for what He's doing in both your spouse and in your marriage. And yes, you may be hurt by what your spouse discloses to you, and you may be confused, and you may be overwhelmed, and you're probably going to have to take your time and work through a lot of issues and a lot of things that you're going to have to figure out as you work through the difficulties in your marriage and your relationship, and as you work toward being healthier together sexually. But I encourage you with all my heart that if your spouse is desiring to become the person who wants to limit the expression of their sexual gift exclusively to you as their spouse from this day forward through the sexual alliance, then I encourage you by all means to seriously consider working with your spouse as together you bring not only your sexuality, but also yourselves and your marriage under the authority and the blessing of God. And I believe that in the end, this is what you really want in your heart anyway, and that you have everything to gain and nothing to lose by establishing a sexual alliance with your spouse. And in conclusion, let me say, we've come a long way and we've covered a lot of ground in this session. We've reviewed 19 different principles of the sexual alliance, and we've taken 6 episodes to do this. And the 19 principles that we've covered are this in the way of review. Number 1, the definition of the sexual alliance. Number 2, the biblical basis for the sexual alliance. Number 3, most couples assume they have a sexual alliance. Number 4, the sexual alliance that many couples assume they have is often way too vague. Number 5, the sexual alliance often fails when the reality of life sets in. Number 6, many couples, if not most couples, do not have a true sexual alliance. Number 7, questions about the sexual alliance. Number 8, every couple must decide if they want a true sexual alliance. Number 9, the sexual alliance will give you the opportunity to come clean with one another. Number 10, the sexual alliance may lead you to one of the biggest crossroads of your lives. Do we disclose to each other the truth of who we really are as sexual persons and the extent of our sexual activity since we've been married? Number 11, the inevitable question, isn't it better to not tell the truth? Number 12, the sexual alliance may require a prolonged period of sexual abstinence while you process the truth of what you revealed to one another. Number 13, realize that you can forgive and trust can be reestablished. Number 14, the sexual alliance will give both of you the opportunity to face, admit, and process the sexual dysfunction that's existed in your relationship. Number 15, the sexual alliance will help you to establish a sexual rhythm that works in your relationship. Number 16, the sexual alliance will help you to reduce and eliminate many of the confusing and negative dynamics that have existed around sex and have contributed to the unhealthy and counterproductive cycles that have existed in your relationship. Number 17, the sexual alliance will require you to walk in the light with each other. Number 18, the sexual alliance will make sexual integrity possible in a couple's life. And number 19, a word of encouragement. And the thesis of this series of episodes, The Sexual Alliance, is this. It's God's will, plan, and design that a married couple has a sexual alliance, which means they limit any and all expressions of their corresponding sexualities exclusively to one another. And the definition of the sexual alliance is this. The sexual alliance is a covenant between a husband and a wife where they both recognize and embrace God's design for human sexuality, which means their mutual sexual gifts belong exclusively to one another, that they express their sexual gifts exclusively with one another, and that they will be sexually available to one another on a frequent and recurring basis. And with that being said, we're finishing up this series of episodes called The Sexual Alliance, and I see from the clock that it's time to wrap up this episode of the Power of Purity podcast. And by the way, before I close, let me just say that if you've appreciated this material, if it's intriguing to you, if it's been helpful or interesting, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to contact me, to email me, or to leave a review on the iTunes homepage. And please contact me with any thoughts you might have, any questions or observations or comments or objections. And I'd love to get the feedback, and I'd love to respond to you and try to answer any thoughts or questions you might have. So God bless you guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Power of Purity podcast. I pray that it's been a blessing to you, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in our next episode. So God bless you, and have an awesome day.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.
The Power of Purity Conference. When you're ready to manage your sexual gift in a healthier way, when you're ready to bring your sexual gift under the authority of God, when you're ready to control sex instead of being controlled by sex. The Power of Purity Conference.